Supervision is by the executive committee of the Global Council, where international representatives will comprise about 22 members, while the Central Trust will only comprise of 4 members, like 3+1. So what's the big deal? I mean, why do we do this? That's a question that is being asked. Maybe I would like, maybe Ashok, I'm sorry, because you have the legal background and, so maybe you want to answer this question.
I'm supposed to be asking the questions. Let me see if I can try to help. We have the terms of reference of the Central Trust for the Global Council. And I think whenever one looks at the document, one looks at context, one looks at what we say in law as the factual matrix. And I think the starting point of the context is the concept note that came out in November 2020, where so many provisions were just crying out with a great deal of audacity and very bluntly stating the control that the Central Trust wanted over the international organization. So I think when you look at that context, and then you look at the present document of the Central Trust, which is the terms of reference for the Global Council, I would suggest is not a question of numbers in the executive committee. I would suggest is a question of the authorities within the executive committee. And when you come and say, well, what are the authorities within the executive committees? They are, as you were hearing earlier, as Anupam said, control seemed to be the sticking point. And that control that the Central Trust wants comes in 2 major forms. The first form is the insistence, and for them this is not negotiable, that the Central Trust appoints the head of the international organization. And then it is said, well, in relation to all the officers below the chair of the international organization, i.e. the Prashanti Council, World Foundation, zone chairs, that is to be under the hand of the chairman of the Global Council, who in fact is a trustee himself. And so what you have are 2 very clear sets of absolute authority. One is in appointing the chair of the international organization, and one is signing off on all the appointments. And the question then becomes, well, what if the chair of the executive committee, the chair of the Global Council, refuses to sign off? Well, if he refuses to sign off, no appointment can be made. And so the question then really is, why in these terms of reference are they so insistent upon controlling appointments? Now, I've heard it said, well, they don't really mean to control it, that the recommendation will be made by the executive committee, and that the chair of the Global Council will simply sign off. Is a matter of formality. Well, I'm sorry, if one looks at the document, which is presently the position of the Central Trust, nowhere does it say that it's a matter of formality that the chair will sign the appointments. And so my question is this, and I really turn it on its head. If the Central Trust is being genuine, if they say it is a pure formality, well, then I would say, well, why don't you keep to your initial assurance you gave us in the joint meeting, which is that structure and functions will not change? Why don't you allow us to make our own appointments? And we will, of course, notify the chair of the Global Council. Now, that seems to be a lot more equitable, because that is what Swami created. That is the assurance that they gave us, and that notification is given to the chair. So what I'm saying is, if they were really genuine, they would accept that. But we know the conversation has broken down because of their insistence on control. And then the question is asked, as Leonardo asked it earlier, well, why do you want so much control? And what is the purpose of it? And I think with great respect, it would be very naive to say that although they have in their written documents, both in November 2020 and their latest terms of reference, insisted upon controls over appointments, that is not there for a very specific reason. And I think that is what the concern is. I hope that gives you as good an answer as and satisfies you, Sarah.